Tell me, uh, were there any difficulties that you found in translating? So of course that was in Spanish, but dealt a lot with Filipino culture, which is on the other side of the world from everyone else here.
I don't think, I wouldn't exactly say difficulties. There were definitely challenges. And some of the challenges, I think, I'll be perfectly honest, I've never been to the Philippines. I approach this from a very literary point of view and a cultural point of view, so that when I was doing it, I had to do a lot of research. And the research was actually a lot of fun. Some of the difficulties that come with it were not language difficulties, because Rizal wrote a very, very pure Spanish. I mean, I don't think he was doing anything out of the ordinary for his time period. But to try and envision what it was like in the Philippines without ever having been there was somewhat difficult. So I really had to sort of create visions of what was going on at the time and then translate the Spanish to what I assumed was going on there.
How many similar projects would you say you've worked on as far as translating?
I've just finished my fifth translation. I just finished a translation of short stories by a post-war Mexican writer. So I had done the Noli. Before that, I had done Cabeza de Vaca, who was a 16th century explorer in the United States. And I had done a lot of anthologies and sort of translations within those anthologies as well.
And from having translated the Noli and now the Philly, what differences are there in his writing than a lot of the other novels that you either I've worked with or have yourself written?
Well, I think that the difference you're going to find is that, first of all, there was really no novelistic tradition. What's extraordinary about it was there's really no European-style novelistic tradition in the Philippines when Rizal was writing. So you take it from a European point of perspective as much as a Filipino perspective, and I think that there's a combination in both the Noli and the Fili of a Filipino being affected by European culture. Remember that Rizal went to Europe when he was 20 years old, arrived when he was 21 years old. He then spent the next 5 or 6 years in Europe. So these very formative years of his early adulthood were spent in Europe. And then he comes back to the Philippines for a couple of years, and then he goes back to Europe again. So in a 10-year period, approximately 8 years are spent in Europe. So he becomes a cross-cultural subject. It's not only that the Spanish were in the Philippines, but that he, in his formative 20s, spent most of his time in Europe and was affected by study of language. He studied 5 languages when he was in Europe, and I think that was a very, very important thing because language is malleable in the Noli and the Fili. There's French in it, there's Latin in it, he quotes German poetry. He is all over European culture as much as he is in Filipino culture in both books.
Did you, of course, I read, I'm actually halfway through the book right now. When you came across words like balut and sampangas and stuff like that, were you like, what exactly are these things? Was that a little bit...
I mean, you had to look them up, and I mean, one of the things about the internet and the availability of finding these things, and one of the things that I decided that I really had to do, and it actually says it in my introduction, I think, to the Noli, is that when Rizal was writing, he had to actually put these things directly, the names directly into the book from Tagalog, because there were no words in Spanish for these things. Yeah. So when I actually did the translation, I decided that the only way to do this was to take the botanist's classification and put that in there so people would be able to refer to that. Because how do you describe sampaguitas? You have to say, well, they're sampaguitas. Well, there's really nothing more you can say about them. They're like jasmine flowers, but they're not jasmine flowers. So you just have to say, this is what they are, and this is what the botanist classification is.
Kind of like how a coup d'etat is a coup d'etat.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I just finished a translation where in Spanish they call it a tiro de gracia, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to translate tiro de gracia when a peasant is saying tiro de gracia. Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, peasants don't say coup d'etat. I mean, don't say coup de grace in English. So I had to figure out a completely different way because it doesn't exist in English. I really don't know. I mean, an hour here, an hour there, and the next thing you know, you've translated 400 pages.
Elda Rotor, the editorial director at Penguin Classics. Elda, tell me, as a Filipino American, you're in this position where you have the relaunching the book of Jose Rizal, El Filibusterismo. What does that mean to you personally?
I think it's very, very rewarding as a Filipino American, as an editor, and also because Penguin Classics is committed to providing books for students for course adoption, and it really means a lot to put Rizal on the same shelves as Dickens and Tolstoy and Austen and Bronte, as one of the great classic authors. As a Filipino American, it's very exciting to reach out to my community and celebrate the publications, the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, that we have them in Penguin Classics. And they're just major gifts, artistic gifts from our culture that we'd like to share with the world.
So tell me, obviously Rizal is a 19th century figure. Why do you feel it's important for today's youth to become informed about Jose Rizal?
Well, that's interesting because one of the things I've been raising about Rizal is that the revolutionary spirit that he has is so modern and so relevant. He moved people from his writing. And I think that happens now. It happens when people read novels. It happens when people share text messages about revolutions around the country, around the world. And a lot of these revolutions are being moved by young people. So the power of language and the various formats that you could share ideas like this, the political spirit, really, I think, affects the modern reader. And I think that really touches home when they read Rizal and learn more about him.
Of course, we see now how literature has changed. The way of spreading these revolutionary messages have evolved. Would you say that Rizal would be a million-follower Twitter nowadays?
Yes, definitely. I think he would have a very popular Facebook page, and I think that he would beat Ashton Kutcher. Probably.
So, just just to wrap it up here, I want to get your thoughts on, you said course adaptation. Do you feel that that this book will be a staple in college courses in the future?
I would love it to. And I think that it should go beyond learning about Philippine literature. We already know that throughout the United States there are several universities that adopt Noli Me Tangere from courses as diverse as rhetoric to history. And world literature. So I think that we are continuing to broaden his readership, and it starts with the professors and it starts with curious readers, and the next generation will consider him one of the more notable literary figures that they had not known before.
Our program this evening is surely a fitting way to commemorate his 150th year. We are therefore very proud that tonight Penguin Classics, which is also celebrating its 65th year, has made the publication of the new translation of El Filibusterismo the highlight of this celebration. We acknowledge and congratulate Mr. Harold Augenbraum and Penguin Classics for this. And thank you, Ms. Elda Rotor of Penguin Classics as well. If you were alive, I'm sure that Dr. Jose Rizal will be very happy and proud to see what is happening to his book 120 years after publication. I know that the Noli and Fili are now in the official roster of Penguin Classics. And we know that Dr. Jose Rizal almost did not have the El Filibusterismo published, primarily for lack of funds. Just a bit of background. Most of the Knights of Rizal are very familiar with this, but for those who are not familiar, it took Dr. Jose Rizal quite a while to finish the Fili. He once related to Marcelo H. del Pilar, who was one of the leaders of the propaganda movement, that he was haunted by certain sad presentiments, in that he had been dreaming almost every night of dead relatives and friends a few days before his 29th birthday. This was why he wanted to finish the second part of the Noli, which is of course the Fili, at all costs. When he finally finished it, he wrote his friend Blumentritt on March 29, 1891. I have finished my book. I have not written it with any idea of vengeance against my enemies, but only for the good of those who suffer and for the rights of Tagalog humanity, although brown and not good looking. Quote. who told his friend Jose Rizal that the Philly was more important than the first Noli. Out of funds, Rizal later became despondent as he thought the Philly would never be published. Anyway, the sequel to Rizal's Noli came off the press by the middle of September 1891. And of course, the rest is history. This evening, we will remember Dr. Jose Rizal through his masterpiece, the El Filibusterismo. And I want to say, and I want to repeat this, that I'm so glad that our young Filipino-Americans, the second generation, are spearheading this event. You know, we just had the writ laying downstairs, led by the Knight of Rizal. But this event is spearheaded by no less than the second generation. I know that Dr. Jose Rizal would also be very proud of you. Congratulations to you. So 120 years after the first publication of El Filibusterismo, we see the book being reprinted, retranslated, and reread. Not only in the Philippines, but also in the city of New York. So enjoy the rest of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
We're partnering with Penguin Classics in tonight's celebration of Jose Rizal's 150th birth anniversary and the release of a new translation by Harold Augenbraum of El Filibusterismo by the Philippine national hero Jose Rizal. Tonight is another special night in a spectacular year. We welcomed a new Consul General to New York back in April. We celebrate Jose's birthday this month, and Penguin Classics celebrates its 65th anniversary this year, publishing this new translation in honor of Rizal's 150th birth anniversary. After releasing a translation of his first book, Noli Me Tangere, in 2006. Tonight is also a special night for CORE. Over the last 3 years, we have shifted our focus of the Read Philippines program to not just bring book collections of Filipino literature into libraries, but to broaden the understanding of these books by partnering with authors and bringing individuals together to discuss the relevance of what is being written in these books.
And I came upon him, I became fascinated. I read both the Noli and the Fili, I read biographies, and I think what interested me more than anything else was Rizal as a writer. I didn't really see Rizal as a political figure when I first started. To me, he was a writer and an intellectual, and somebody I admired as much as anybody I heard about and read about in my entire life.
Have my copies.
I understand that you're a big book fan.
Actually, yeah, and I actually just started to. I'm not even touching the Fili yet because I haven't finished the Noli yet. But when I got a big package from Penguin Classics that contained a whole bunch of the books that they publish and 2 autographed copies, you know, and a copy of the Noli that was autographed by Harold Augenbraum, as well as a copy of the Fili, I was like, I was doing a happy dance in my room.
Is that your happy dance?
I did my happy dance in my underwear, just dancing around my room. It's like I got an autographed copy of the Noli and the Fili. You know, it's probably the second best thing to having Rizal actually autograph it for me. But thanks a lot, Harold, for doing it, and to Elda Rotor for getting all the stuff to me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you know what? I think that you're being a role model for education by showing your passion for reading.
Yeah, I love to read, and if I'm into a book, once I get into this, it's like the whole world will just disappear, and my whole world will be about a book, and it'll be like 2-3 days done. I go through I went through I think 4 Harlan Coben books in like a week. Just staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning. It's like, okay, I can't stop. I have to finish this book. Yeah, and the nice thing about Rizal's writings in particular, in the light of what's happening in the country, they're actually still relevant. And you can read passages and go, wow, it could have been written yesterday. And it's something that a lot of young people should read. It's something that a lot of older people should reread.
Unpredictable.
And the cool thing about this is that it stays true to how Rizal actually
unpredictable.
wrote the books.
Yes.
So it's pretty cool. And it's not a difficult read. They actually read like melodramas.